Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the seminar. I'm going to be talking about next generation digital service portfolios today. And here's a little outline of the session. Quick intro to service potential, who we are, where we come from, why we're sponsoring a booth here at Technology In Gov and the cocktail reception tonight, so make sure you come along to that. What is a service portfolio and do we really care about them? How do we transform our experience with service portfolios? What information do you need to make that happen and get more value out of it? And where is the money coming from, or where is it now? And why don't we see it when it comes to service portfolios? So a little bit about my company. I started this back in 2011. And essentially when we first started out, we were working in the IT service management advisory space. We were working with organisations around IT service management process design, how you can implement those processes or improve those processes within your organisation. A lot of work around documentation, process controls, reporting, standard ITSM stuff. What we noticed around 2010 was there was a new entrant into the service management platform space. It had actually been around since about 2005 in the United States, but it took a while to get a foothold over here in Australia. And that platform was ServiceNow. And I remember the first time I looked at it was back in 2009, and I was impressed straight away. For the first time, I had a platform where I could have information that flowed between incident tickets, problem tickets, change management records. I could link my CMDB easily. I could do reporting easily. And things just seemed to be a lot easier for service management folk in this platform. So I decided that I'd get right behind the platform. And so for the last 8 years, we've been building that team up here in Canberra. We've now got 20 staff here in Canberra working specifically for federal government. They're all Australian citizens with acts for clearances. So we do on-premise secure implementations of ServiceNow to hosted implementations. Whatever you need done with it, essentially my team can look after that. And ServiceNow has actually recognised us as the only dedicated federal government partner for the platform here in Australia. In terms of my company and our philosophy, we invest very heavily in our staff. They're all certified on the platform, implementation specialists, and that investment has shown in our CSAT ratings 9.8 out of 10 after 42 implementations. So to maintain that rate has been an exceptional job by my team. I'm very happy about that. ServiceNow, I'm going to take a risk here and say I'm sure most of you have heard of ServiceNow. Put your hands up if you've heard of ServiceNow in the market. Yep. Okay. They've got a very good marketing team behind them. Lots of money, so they make sure that everyone knows about them. And what they did, they first started out and focused on the ITSM space. And they went very heavy on that for around 5-6 years. And as they started to mature that product, they started pushing out into other areas of the enterprise. So we're seeing now that ServiceNow is moving into HR, financial management, marketing, legal, project management, security, and a whole bunch of different areas, which we commonly don't link to an IT service management platform. So it's really refreshing for me to see this happen, because I've always looked at ITSM as being a very structured function within the organisation. We have good processes, we have good reporting, we have service levels, everything is very tightly run. So it was great to see this discipline starting to spread into other areas of the enterprise. So, getting on to the subject matter at hand, what is a service portfolio and do we really care? So as an ITSM professional, you're probably wondering why I'm asking, do we really care? Because this is my bread and butter. Well, the reality is in most organisations that I've worked with over the last 2 decades, service portfolios are something that are often neglected. People see them as a list. As a matter of fact, Wikipedia see it as a consolidated list of services and offerings within the organisation. And generally what we tend to see is that people say, yep, I've got the concepts, this is not complicated. We've got services in our pipeline, proposed services, we've got our active services, and we've got our services that are going to retire. That's not a hard thing to understand. But the limiting factor of this definition is the fact that you think that it might just be a list. Yes, it might just capture these service attributes, and it might put these in a catalogue so that everyone can see them, what's involved in terms of service levels around it and everything like that. But the big thing that's missing in the service portfolio is its linkage to service cost information. And that's not just about the price you pay if you purchase a specific service. This is about service delivery. What is this service costing me in terms of its subcomponents? So things like labour, things like hardware, things like software. How are we exposing that information up to the service portfolio level so that if you have to make a decision about what am I going to invest in next as a CIO, you've got that information and you're making an informed decision rather than a gut feel because the service desk has told you, well, the top 5 calls we're getting are password resets, laptops and everything else. This is about using the information that's already in your organisation to inform what your service portfolio looks like. Now again, that seems like a fairly simple concept. So why doesn't it work? Well, we didn't do ourselves favours in ITSM. We sort of took something that was fairly simple conceptually and we overcomplicated it with a whole bunch of diagrams such as these, life cycles, and these things are important, but they are not the end state for a service portfolio. They're really just descriptors. And so they don't really give executives a good understanding of what does my ICT service landscape look like and how do I make that information easier to consume. And this is part of the reason why, because much like an ITSM process, you would sometimes invest the money in getting someone like me to come into your organisation, and you would pay me really good money to build a service portfolio in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. And then we would save that in SharePoint or somewhere on your corporate directory, and you would never see it again. And so the service portfolio existed, but it was literally locked in a cupboard at the back of the room, and no one was really using it. And that's why the function doesn't get invested in, because it's not a squeaky wheel. People aren't complaining about it. Most of your customers don't even know you've got a service portfolio. They know you've got a service catalogue. So there's not that high level of awareness going on within your organisation. So how do we change that? And again, a few bullet points here around that just back up what I was just saying, and that is we've had this siloed or tribal knowledge about certain service attributes and certain inclusions. The key point on this slide is probably the third bullet point, and that is if I had $1 for every time I walked into an organisation and I asked about service costs, and somebody said to me, oh, that's SAP, that's SAP, you need to go and talk to finance about that. And I'm saying, well, hang on, these are services that we are responsible for in IT. We should have access to this information. We shouldn't just be managing cost centres and thinking that we're managing our services through our cost centres. It's a very low tactical level of looking at how we manage our services. And so what we began to identify across many organisations, not just one, and this was both in the commercial space and in the government space, is that there was this disconnect between the service delivery managers and the people who are actually delivering services to your business and finance. And sometimes the IT departments had their own finance team, but those teams didn't speak to the finance area either. And so the information that was coming across was getting, it wasn't in great shape. We had duplication of vendors and suppliers in this. The CMDBs weren't in great shape, so we had a lot of obstacles to try and get a clear picture. And again, all this information feeds up to your service portfolio. Okay, so where to from here? So one of the things I wanted to share with you today is what does a digital service portfolio look like? And why am I using the term digital? Well, it's a deliberate act by me to try and move our thinking away from a service portfolio being something that sits in an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint or a Word document. In my mind, when we talk about digital transformation and we talk about the consumerisation of IT services, and people talk about, I want what I can do on my mobile phone in my workplace, the drivers behind that is your connectivity of information. And so by pushing this into a common database where you've got cost information sitting in tables that are linked to your service portfolio, then as your OPEX and CAPEX investments occur, you're seeing that reflected in the information that underpins your services. So this is just a nice little neat way of representing the service catalogue. And then on each one of those, you can click into ServiceNow. This is using the ITBM product suite, for those of you familiar with ServiceNow. And you can get a very nice, clean picture of what are my service offerings within a particular service, what are my response rates, what are the inclusions for the service. This is just an example, it's not everything. But you're moving away from something that sits in a cupboard or sits on a shelf to something that you can easily edit, you can easily update. And so the concept of retiring a service doesn't become a hard process anymore. It actually becomes really simple. It almost becomes like you're changing a request catalogue item. It's a lot easier to do. The other thing that ServiceNow has done very well is the introduction of their executive dashboards. And in particular, the linking of IT financial management information to the service portfolio. What we're looking at here is a view of a business application that's underpinning an ICT service. And what we're seeing up in the top, and I just want to let everyone know this is out of the box. This is not something that's been done just for today's seminar. If you turn on ServiceNow and you link your IT financial management module, you will get this information come through. And the dependency is on your ERP data. All right, so again, if you're using SAP or something like that, I'll talk about this a little bit further on, but you do need to have that information coming in to be able to populate these dashboards. So what we're doing here is we're going to go and have a look at what sales are doing, because sales are spending 30% of our annual ICT spend. And straight away what we're seeing is that there seems to be two applications in particular that the sales team are spending more money on. And when we look at the information just down here, we're seeing that we've got some subcomponent costs related around facilities, hardware, labour, other services and software. And we can drill down into that information. And again, this is not information that we usually have available to us when we're looking at a service portfolio. So much like anything in IT service management on these platforms, gluing the information together, having the common repository and being able to link between the different applications is where you get the real value. So when we go and have a look at those two applications, we're going to come down here and we're going to see that cost-wise, we're getting the biggest spend. So in terms of the sales spend around all the applications they use, Cost Track and Direct Ship are consuming almost half of their annual spend. And so what we'll do after this is we'll go into the next one and we'll start analysing where those costs are coming from. And what I just want to reiterate is when you bring in the financial information into your platform, you start seeing your services in a new light. You start understanding not just the cost of the service, but the aggregate of subcomponent costs and how they're affecting the overall cost of that service. So this is another dashboard that ServiceNow has out of the box called Application TCO, the total cost of ownership. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and find one of those applications that was costing us a lot of money. We'll choose Direct Ship here. And what we're going to see here is what is the cost last period? What's the trending information? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it fairly stable? What is the cost per user? These are important metrics that we can have in conversations with our executives who may have no understanding whatsoever or no visibility of what the true cost of a service is. Because remember, this includes all your OPEX. So instead of them thinking, oh, well, hang on, direct ship only costs me $500 per month per user, you can actually say, well, actually, the overall cost is about $9,500 because we've got all these other components coming in that you're not aware of. And so what we can do is we can drill down from the business service into the IT shared services. And we can start looking at what are the IT shared services, the technical services coming through, and what are the costs related to those which are affecting the overall cost for this one. And what we're seeing here is a few different IT shared services such as configuration change, end user equipping. And again, for both of these, the highest cost is around labour. So how do we get here? So as I mentioned earlier, one of the important things is to bring in your ERP data. So if you're a government department, you're highly likely you're probably using SAP, and that's always been a struggle. Well, the good news is that ServiceNow for some years now has had a SAP plugin, right? And the beauty of this plugin is that it maintains the integrity of the general ledger. It brings that general ledger information in for all the ICT service cost elements, and then you get to create your buckets. And what that does is that helps us turn financial speak into IT speak. So we start talking about things like the costs that we're familiar with, like software, like hardware, like labour, like services. Is it a cloud service? How do we change that language? And because we're doing the assignments, and ServiceNow provides those prescriptive cost models in the product, it's not an extra, it comes out of the box. You just do that transform mapping between those buckets and the general ledger, and what it's giving you here is a graphical representation of where that money's going and how it's being allotted per service. So one of the things that we're seeing with ServiceNow as it grows its footprint across the enterprise is we can really have a different conversation around the performance of our service portfolio and how we propose new services, how we manage our active services, and how we retire services. Things like understanding the total cost for a service might tell us it's time to retire this service because it's too expensive. Or if you've had a machinery of government change and your budget's been slashed by 30% and you have to do the same with less money, where do you go and look for that information? And traditionally, we've had to go to the ERP. We've had to go and dig through SAP spreadsheets and screens and sit down with financial people and try and understand their language. But we don't have to do that anymore. I'm not saying don't speak to your finance people. We've got to partner with them. But this gives you a very easy opportunity to bring that information into ServiceNow, interact with other tables within your database, and start getting actionable insights from your data set. So the key takeaways from this presentation that I want you to think about is that when it comes to our people, reflect back into your own organisation and ask yourself who is actually having these conversations around the cost of our services and what's actually in our service portfolio. Do they have the skills to manage your service portfolio? Have they actually ever seen the financial information that sits behind your services? Or is that something that's still confined to the finance team? The process. Within your current service portfolio, within your organisations, no matter what solution it might even be ServiceNow, are you getting cost transparency? Are you seeing it? Is there linkage from your service portfolio through to IT financial management information? Technology. From an automation perspective, rather than having someone sit down and manipulate spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet for every single service you have, is there a smarter way of doing this? Can we bring the information into a platform such as ServiceNow and actually start using the analytic functionality within ServiceNow to get a better story and get better insights? And information management, that's the key one. What do you need to know and what information do you need to have to manage your service portfolio with confidence? And that's your ERP data. A couple of points to take away here. This is not just one activity. This is a stage of evolution that you get to by doing the hard yards. And one of the hardest things to do up front is actually mapping your services to your CMDB. All right? So we can have the best CMDB in the world, but if we're still working at a configuration item level and we have no understanding of how our configuration items impact our services, then you're not really going to get too far. So definitely map your services to your CMDB and make sure your service portfolio is integrated into your solution. So build it within your platform. Don't have it sitting off in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or something like that. Otherwise, you'll never be able to make this connection. Get your key decision makers, your service owners involved. Get them appreciating the cost of their services. Make sure your IT financial management team are part of the conversation as well. They will bring their skills and their knowledge of how your services are costed to the table, and they will teach you things that you didn't know or that you were not aware of around your services. Start with out-of-the-box functionality. Everything you've seen here today is out of the box except for the data, which we've put in there. But in terms of functionality, if you have an ITBM and an ITSM subscription with ServiceNow, this is something you can have up and running in 6 weeks. That 6-week labour cost is really about getting your finance people to the team and mapping your financial data back into your service portfolio. Raise awareness with other execs about real-time portfolio transparency so that you're not managing your budget on last year's spend plus 3%, which is how we see it done in a lot of organisations. Okay? There's a bigger story to this. And also, don't be afraid to break it. When you use the service portfolio in anger and you start looking for key information, this is about helping you improve budgeting and estimating within your own organisation. If you have to fall back on spreadsheets, then you're missing something. We're not doing something right there. So don't be afraid to get in there and make the information work for you, because this is your platform. You've paid a lot of money for it, so get the most out of it. And I've been seeing this for about 2 decades now. Most organisations are quite happy to spend somewhere between $1 to $4 to $8 million on a service management solution, and then after about 3 or 4 years, I see them starting to complain that this product wasn't the right one for them. But when you go and have a look at how much they're using the platform, they tend to be only using about 40 to 50%, and they're blaming the product. It's not about the product. It's about getting in there and actually exploiting the functionality and features of the platform and getting a better return on investment for your subscription. The price of this product goes up every year, probably twice a year. So if you're going to invest that money for your organisation, then you want to see value for money. And this is one way that you can definitely get more value for money on your ServiceNow investment. Thanks very much, everyone. If you've got any questions, feel free to speak up.